Dum 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 dum.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here but you're not, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through.
Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you.
There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain,
when I believed in forever and everything would stay the same.
Now my heart feel like December when somebody say your name.
'Cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will one day, yeah.
Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday, yeah.
But everything will be alright. Go as your voice will say, hey.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here but you're not, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you. Memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I never felt so lost,
When I felt that all the hatred was too powerful to stop. Now my heart feels like an ember, and it's lighting up the dark.
I'll carry these torches for ya,
That you know I'll never drop, yeah.
Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday, hey, hey.
But everything gon' be alright.
Go and raise your voice and say, hey.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here but you're not, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through.
Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you.
Memories bring back you. Memories bring back you. Memories bring back you. Here's to the world. Cheers. Memories bring back you. Here's to the world. Here's to the world. Memories bring back you. Memories bring back you.
Welcome to this time celebrating the life of Joyce Winnard, Mum or Nan to many of us. My name is Andy Nicholson and I'm Nan's grandson through marriage to Debbie Nicholson, Roger and Audrey Barnett's daughter. Now, in ordinary circumstances, we would have had the opportunity to spend time together sharing stories and memories of Nan and giving thanks for her life. But although we're separated by this situation we find ourselves in, my hope is that during this next hour we can be together in celebrating the life of a wonderful woman. Nan had a deep and personal faith that expressed itself through loving actions and words. Her joy of life and her care and interest in her family and friends. All of the musical tributes today had special meaning for Nan. But first, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the life and love of Nan, for all that she meant to so many people in her family, her churches and her friends. We thank you for her laughter and joy of life. We thank you for the love you give to us all. Amen. We now begin our time of remembrances with a song that we know gave Nan a great deal of strength throughout her life. He giveth more grace.
He giveth more grace as our burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength as our labours increase. To added afflictions he addeth his mercy. To multiply trials he multiplies peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's forgiving is only begun. His love has no limits, His grace has no measure, His power no boundary known unto man. For out of His infinite riches in Jesus He giveth and giveth and giveth again.
One of the activities that Mum enjoyed at Sunnyfields Lodge was a visit of the therapy pets. The picture on screen just now shows Mum handling a tortoise. Unfortunately, other pictures that were taken on that occasion didn't come out. I'd thought that perhaps the therapy pets would be just a dog or a rabbit or maybe a guinea pig or two. But no, Mum stroked a barn owl and had a snake on her lap, which incidentally she thought felt very strange but nice. But when a tarantula began circulating round the room and I whispered in her ear what was coming next, she wasn't quite so sure. How many ladies of 93 can boast they've held a tarantula? I teased. I'm doing it, said her neighbour. Well, so am I then, said Mum, and she held out a hand to let the tarantula crawl on the back of it. Pity the photo proof didn't turn out. The photograph on the screen was taken in Mum's kitchen on the morning of her 90th birthday. It shows on display the gifts she'd received, but one gift deserves special mention. Its story began the previous summer when Mum, Roger and I did a house swap with David and Grace in Jersey. Mum and I were amazed to find David had selected an extremely large quantity of flat-packed toilet paper and had it seemingly in every nook and cranny. Obviously a fear of running out of paper in that household, we thought. Later we teased David about the paper and Mum remarked that he had so much of it, but she was having difficulty in finding even one flat pack of toilet paper for her flat pack holder at home. On her 90th birthday, there was a beautifully wrapped parcel from David and Grace. Mum unwrapped it carefully and found inside 6 flat pack toilet paper inside. She began to laugh and laughed until tears were streaming down her face. And Mum always had a good sense of humour, but the image of that morning's laughter and her genuine appreciation of the joke still makes me smile.
When I was around 7 years old, Nan and Grandad took me on holiday to Ramsgate. We went by train, or as I called it back then, a Twainway. They had many hours teasing me about the fact that I couldn't say train properly, along with the fact that while on holiday, every time I went off to play on the beach, I came back with a new best friend. And this went on the entire time of the holiday. The other thing I remember about this holiday was the cold shower. I don't remember anything else, just the cold shower. And as I remember it clearly to this day, it must have been very cold. In later years, I was privileged to go and stay at my nan's just before the end of my granddad's life, and I was able to spend time with her and with granddad and to be able to help with some of the care he needed at that time. To be able to take Nan shopping and be able to spend time with her chatting and getting to know her as the adult I was then. Her love and her support over the years has been amazing. I feel very honoured to be able to say that she was my grandmother. At the end, just before lockdown, while Mum and Dad were away in Mauritius, I was able to go along with my nan to an afternoon tea at her home, and we spent a lovely afternoon with me again being teased about the fact that they had to provide a special menu for me because I'm vegan. And it was really, really nice to be able to see her in her home environment with all her new friends. And just a few days later, well, just a week or so later on, Debbie and I went with Nan to Fountains Abbey and had afternoon cup of tea, sat there literally the day before everything became locked down. And that is the last memory I have of my nan, and it is a lovely one to remember her by. I'd like to share a poem with you that I found just after my nan died. It's called A Silent Tear. Just close your eyes and you will see all the memories you have of me. Just sit and relax and you will find I'm really still there inside your mind. Don't cry for me now, I'm gone, for I am in the land of song. There is no pain, there is no fear, so dry away that silent tear. Don't think of me in dark and cold, for here I am no longer old. I'm in the place that's filled with love, known to you all as up above.
This is Roger reading Gabrielle, my granddaughter's memories of her grandmother. Nan has always been a part of my life. I remember sitting behind her chair when I was very young, drawing in colouring books and playing with some of her dolls. I always liked the knitted doll in her bathroom. She was there to encourage me to learn about my first favourite animal. Staying at hers, watching documentaries about wolves, and letting me tell her all about how packs look after each other. I would hear the ice cream van and get really excited every day that holiday, and she promised me I could have one on my last night, but I was ill that night. Whenever we saw one another, it became a running joke, and I'd remind her of this ice cream. Around 5 years later, she remembered her promise and reminded me cheerfully, getting not only me and Joe ice lollies, but also ice lollies for her new grandkids, Melody and Tyra, her heart always having room for more. She always was family orientated, always the happiest, surrounded by her family at Christmas and meals out. She would make us all laugh with some very clever remarks at times, and was always such a strong woman through everything life put her through. She would take it with a smile on her face and keep going. Every time I visited her house, I would beg to ride her chair up the stairs, and Mum would remind me it's not a toy, but I was allowed to ride it up and down once each time I was there. She aged gracefully, but her mind stayed youthful with the rest of us. Her name fit her well, Joyce. She brought the joy into every room she entered, always full of optimism. She was loving and accepting of everyone, and was very loved in return.
As a family, we've been very fortunate over the last few years to celebrate Christmas with Nan. She was always keen to join in the fun, playing silly games, name that tune on a bazooka, Trivia Pursuits Nicholson style, and mince pies. One year we each had a coaster that had a secret challenge for us to carry out over the course of dinner. Throughout the meal, Nan kept asking to see our gifts from the crackers that we had pulled. Assuming she couldn't quite make out what we had, so wanted to feel them, we dutifully passed them over, not realising that they never came back to us. Her challenge? To steal everyone's cracker gift.
Nan always showed an interest in me and would listen attentively to my latest project. I remember our family taking her out for a birthday meal and me telling her all about a computer program I was designing. She probably understood nothing of what I was telling her, but she never interrupted me or looked bored. She always made me feel valued.
I can't help but smile when I think of Nan, huddled under a blanket in our lounge, randomly calling out the answer to a trivia question, regardless of which team's turn it was. We all thought she was asleep. I miss her sense of fun.
Nan was an important member of our family, and it's been a privilege over the last few years getting to know her better, spending time with her and sharing the ups and downs of life with her. She will be missed.
When I look back and think of good times with Nan, I have to go back decades. That is because I have not lived in England for close to 2 decades now, albeit 7 months over 8 years ago. I remember travelling up to see Nan and Grandad, knowing that for certain a few things would take place. Sharing a room with Debbie, nice cakes, steak and kidney pie and chips on the way home, or battered sausages, and funny toilet paper. I would play on Grandad's organ wearing headphones, lie in front of the fire playing with Nan's tortoise ornaments. We would go and play in the park, visit Gran across the road, and get called Roger. Since being in Mauritius, we would talk when Nan came to stay with my parents. She got to speak to a side of family she never met in person, which is truly a shame, as we had planned to come to England on holiday in 2022 to visit our family there. As I said, at least she got to talk to Joelle, Jonathan and Abigail on the phone on occasions. Nan, you will be missed. All our love from Mauritius.
I love you, everybody.
Bye.
I have always thought of myself as being very fortunate for having a very good mother-in-law. There are lots of jokes around about mother-in-laws, but I can honestly say in my experience, I don't identify myself with any of them. My mother-in-law, or Mum as I called her, was always there to support and help me. When we were Salvation Army officers in our first appointment, she would offer her help and support. When our second daughter, Debbie, was born, it was Mum who came and supported and helped Audrey with the preparations, birth and aftercare. I was allowed to get on with my work. I developed a close relationship with Mum, probably because we were both born in Jersey. She already knew my mother and my grandparents and had memories which she frequently shared with me. We attended the same Salvation Army Corps, although I was not around when she was there. Mum was evacuated to Manchester during the war, as was my own mother. My mother-in-law attended the Salvation Army in Bolton, whereas my birth mother attended the Salvation Army in Manchester. They would meet up at Channel Island reunions, etc. from time to time. So we had history and shared many memories of people we knew, as well as growing up memories which, although not the same, were similar. My mother-in-law was a good confidant. You could tell her anything and know for certain that it would remain with her. She was very open-minded and able to maintain her values and ideas. My mother-in-law was a quiet, refined lady, but enjoyed a good joke and had a great sense of humour. No doubt as you listen to what the younger members of the family say about her, you will begin to see that she was much loved, highly thought of, respected, and will be greatly missed. In these last days we saw a very determined lady who, after eye treatment when blind, she coped with the situation admirably. She learnt who was around by feel. She learnt who was around her by listening to footsteps, tone of voice, and was usually right as to who was coming or was there. On moving from our home to her flat, she quickly made friends with all the residents and enjoyed very much sharing with them all. Such was the person who I am proud to know as my mother-in-law. There are many things in my life which I value, but I have always valued the fact that I became a member of Audrey's family and loved, respected, and thought a lot of mother and father-in-law. Thank you, Mom.
Mum was a wonderful lady, and I am honoured to be her daughter-in-law. I have known her for all of my life. Howard and I were born within 4 months of each other. We spent every Sunday at Torp Hill Salvation Army. She was my company guard, my singing company leader, keeping Howard in check when he pulled my ringlets. In the songsters she sat behind me, and I've often heard her voice in my head singing along with my mum. What wonderful memories. We shared a lot of interests, especially in crafts, embroidery and knitting. She was my Auntie Joyce and then, most importantly, my mother-in-law. She had a wicked sense of humour and a great love of shopping, especially on Bolton Market. She was always interested in what her grandchildren were doing. When Howard and I got married, both Mum and Dad immediately treated my children as their own, and for this I will be eternally thankful. She was a wonderful Nan. When one of her grandchildren opened his birthday present, he looked at it and declared, "Nan gets awesome presents." Mum and Dad shared so much. How she coped so well after Dad died, I will never know. Learning computer skills, joining Facebook, such determination in spite of losing the love of her life. The only thing in Mum's life which came above all others was her love of her Heavenly Father. What an example. Thank you for all the love that you have given to me. Thank you for being my mum. I am so proud to be your daughter. I will finish as I usually did at the end of our phone calls. God bless. Take care. Love you lots.
Hi, my name's Ella. I am Nan's great-granddaughter. I would like to say that I am so sorry that I couldn't be there due to unfortunate circumstances. When I heard the devastating news, I was gutted. If Nan was here, she would tell us, "Don't be upset," and she would give everyone that smile that would light up the room. I would like to say this to Nan. I'm so sorry to hear this. There are so many things I wanted to do, like to come see you, so you could meet Will and be there when I walk down the aisle and say I do. You will forever be in my heart. I know you will be watching over all of us, and I already miss you and I love you. I hope you are happy up there. You deserve it. So this is it. Thank you for everything, Nan. This is only goodbye for now.
It was a couple of years ago, in the middle of that most beautiful summer we had, with wall-to-wall glorious sunshine and brilliant blue skies. I hadn't been too well and had just returned from a short stay in hospital. Uncle Roger, Auntie Audrey and Nan drove over to see me, firstly to check how I was, and secondly to see if I had settled into my new apartment I had recently moved into. I hadn't seen Nan for quite some time. There I was, sat in my pyjamas, next to Nan, who looked incredibly glamorous with her recently styled hair after a visit to Shea Audrey's, her in-house salon. Nan looked better than she had for years, with a new zest for life. With my hand in hers, we both laughed, saying how much she had put us all to shame with her ability to always be positive and living life to the very full. Obviously, moving to Yorkshire with Uncle Roger and Auntie Audrey really suited her, and it shone through in abundance. Nan was always full of love, joy and compassion, and there wasn't a day that went by that she wasn't tremendously proud of all her family. God bless Nan. Love, Vicky.
This is Howard and Michael playing I Come to the Garden Alone, which was one of Mum's favourite songs.
Tribute to Mum / Nan from the Payne family, read by Andy Nicholson. I've taken this opportunity to write this tribute to our much-loved Mum on behalf of my wife Irene, myself and our 2 children. Mum helped to pave the pathway for myself and Irene, opening her home to me, enabling me to move from Jersey so we could start courting. It took a month for me to acquire employment, and I was fed and sheltered during that time, and I remember fondly being treated as part of the family. Of course, mine and Irene's marriage wasn't easy, and Mum was there when Irene suffered ill health, taking care of our 2 children a number of times, being a mum when their mum was in hospital. Anthony and Angie have always had a bond with her because of this. She was a huge support to both myself and Angie when visiting Irene in later years of illness. She would accompany us on visits and was the air of calmness and strength when times were hard and upsetting. I believe it was that strength and support that got myself and Irene through these times in our 50 years of marriage. We were blessed to live so close to Mum and enjoyed regular roast Sunday dinners which were cooked to perfection. Others may also remember the banging pudding, a steamed sponge pudding with jam on top, which the children would bang with a spoon to get it out of the dish. Anthony and Angie recall going to the cupboard in the front room, getting out games and toys that they would play with, toys that were still there in later years for their children to play with. As our children grew and had their own children, they would spend time with Nan. Angie took her girls for Sunday dinners, which resulted in Ella wanting nothing but Nanny's mince, and even requested it for her mum's wedding reception. All grandchildren that came to see her left with a biscuit or some chocolate. Being the proud grandmother that she was, her cupboard doors were covered with the drawings made by her many grandchildren. Despite being born blind in one eye, she was a perfectionist when it came to baking, cooking, sewing, and many other household things. She made each of her children's wedding cakes and took time to make sure they were just right. Nothing but the best would do. In later years, she was losing the sight of her good eye. She had her cataracts treated, and for a short time her vision improved. Angie recalls her saying that when she started looking in the mirror, she was surprised to see how many wrinkles she had. When her sight started to go again, she took it in her stride. I can recall meeting her in town, and she found it humorous that people were walking around with no heads on. Another time I went to the bank with her, and she was in stitches trying to sign her signature when she couldn't see her writing. Myself and Irene enjoyed meeting her in town every Tuesday for lunch for a number of years, when she would chastise Irene and keep up as she was slowing her down. I felt blessed to have her as my mother-in-law, and have teased her many times with mother-in-law jibes, which were always met with much laughter owing to her sense of humour, something which we shared. We've always got on. She was a great support for me. I had my heart operation. Irene was again suffering with ill health in hospital, and when I needed full-time care during my recovery, she offered her home once again to me. I had a stroke whilst recovering in hospital, so this meant that I needed help with many things, such as putting on socks and cutting up my food as I struggled to use a knife and fork. We went out to McDonald's for a lunchtime treat, so that I could eat without needing cutlery. It was the first time she had ever gone to McDonald's, and possibly the last. She wasn't phased by technology and managed to fix our sewing machine, and in her 80s was using a computer and mobile phone to text and email family. Her family meant everything to her, and she made sure each of her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, their birthdays got remembered by her. She will always be remembered for her loving nature and positive outlook on life. Never one to grumble, but just took what life dealt her and made the best of it. Her smile and friendly personality shining through, making her a well-loved mum, Nan, and Great Nan. I considered her not only as a mother, but a close friend.
A poem by Angie Hallowell, Nan's granddaughter. Nan, I know you're gone, but there's so much still that you've left behind I remember so clear. That beaming smile, those hugs so tight, your sewing skills with lack of sight. Your eyes that sparkled, your laugh infectious, your understanding when I was reckless. Your cooking and baking, how can I forget your roast dinners where the family met? You liked clip-on earrings, your favourite colour green, you always so happy every time you were seen. You cared for your husband and also your mother. You took things in your stride as if it was no bother. You made clothes for my dolls and a teddy bear too, and one for my friend so she wouldn't be blue. Your gardens were perfect, and when we went out you had in your handbag what we needed, no doubt. So much strength that you had from your Christian faith, and it shone through in words, actions and face. That close bond between us from when I was a babe that just got much deeper as I continued to age. So much to hold on to, my memories so sweet. You're with me forever until next time we meet.
We are David and Grace from Jersey and very proud to be cousins of Joyce Winnard. Joyce is particularly special to me because she spent most of her life living in Bolton, and as Bolton is my hometown, that makes it a very special connection. We used to travel to Bolton quite frequently, and something about driving up the M6, turning off onto the A66, which meant that we were on our way to the Mecca of the North, Bolton, which was very special to me. We have also visited Joyce down in her flat in Ripon, paid her a surprise visit, and that was the last time we actually met up with her. Joyce, Roger and Audrey also did a house swap with us, and they stayed down here while we stayed up in Ripon. And theoretically we should have passed as we crossed in the channel. Unfortunately, Roger had an accident, things didn't work out quite as planned, and when we arrived back in Jersey we found that Joyce was our house guest. Still, she was very well behaved and it was great to have her around. We have a stair lift, so between Joyce and Grace the stair lift was kept very busy going up and down the stairs, a bit like the number 19 bus. Just to mark the occasion of Joyce staying in our house, I put this note up on the wall which said, Joyce, the Bolton VIP, stayed here, because that was that important. But there are so many memories that we could tell of Joyce, but all I should finish with and say is that Joyce, a very special lady, we salute your memory. God bless.
Hi, we're Graham and Kath Guy from Jersey. I have the privilege of being a cousin of Joyce's, and our families were both evacuated to Bolton during the war years. My first memory ever of Joyce was on an occasion when she presumably would paid money to look after her young cousin, and we went shopping. I think we were shopping for some equipment that she needed for a demonstration of the Salvation Army with some young people. At the conclusion of the war years, my mother and father and our family returned to Jersey. John and Winnard and her little family stayed in the UK. Shortly after we came back to Jersey, my father managed to acquire a Ford Anglia car, and guided or encouraged by my mother to visit various members of the family in the UK, we bombed along the roads in this little car, all 5 of us, and spent time with either friends or family in our 2 weeks holiday, which is what we had in those days. Obviously, we spent time with Joyce and John and her family on those visits, and we always enjoyed their company. And our everlasting memory of Joyce was a really genuine lady, full of love and affection, always interested to know what was going on in the life of the other members of the family. So we're sorry to hear of her passing, and we share with your sorrow, but also we share in your rejoicing that she is gone to a heavenly reward, and she leaves behind lovely memories which we can all share today.
It was an honour to have been asked to make a contribution to Joyce's Thanksgiving celebration. Joyce was always special to me, and I think it could have been the fact that I was born at the home of my Auntie Sissy, Joyce's mother, so she would have known me from my first days. My first real memory of Joyce was during a visit to Bolton, where her family had been evacuated to during the German occupation of Jersey. My family had settled in Scotland, and we had been able to visit Bolton to meet up with the rest of my mother's family in Bolton. After the occupation, we returned to Jersey, as did Joyce's mother and father, but I think Joyce remained in Bolton. However, I do remember being present at her marriage to John, which took place in Jersey. Over the years, we were able to visit Bolton to see my aunt, and we would also be able to visit Joyce and John. There was never a year went by that I did not receive a birthday card from Joyce, and this was most appreciated. It was a privilege for Barbara and I to pay a visit to Ripon last year and to meet up with Audrey and Roger, and we were also able to spend a lovely afternoon with Joyce in her comfortable accommodation, enjoying tea and biscuits and catching up with all the news. We will miss her, but we know she is now with her Lord in the place prepared for her. God bless you, Joyce.
Hi, it's Cousin Gordon here. Just a few little memories of Auntie Joyce. My family had moved away from Bolton when I was 5, but aged 10 I came back to Bolton to sit my entrance exams for Bolton School. I was very nervous, and Auntie Joyce very kindly arranged for me to go to their house at lunchtime in the break between exams. She looked after me, gave me a very relaxing and calming break. I do fondly remember after lunch playing electric trains with Howard on his train set. Great fun. We then moved back to Bolton, and of course we were all pretty involved in the Salvation Army in those days. We all received early musical training in the singing company or junior choir under Auntie Joyce's enthusiastic leadership. We'd be, I guess, in an age group of about 8 or 9 through to 12 or 13 at that time. I do hear there's a photo doing the rounds of the said singing company. I expect we've all changed quite a lot since then. It'd be interesting and somewhat scary to see it, I guess. Later on, when we were all in our teens, I would often go round for Sunday tea at Granny Pipril's in the short break, and it was a short break, between our afternoon and evening meetings. After tea, we'd often spend an hour round the piano having a family sing-song, Uncle John bashing away there on the piano and us all singing away, practising our harmonies. And I'm sure Auntie Joyce used to enjoy that as much as I did. I'd just like to finish with a very short musical tribute. I'm fairly sure this was a family favourite hymn. Not the favourite, but a favourite. I'm pretty sure, in any case, it was a favourite of Uncle John's. And I do remember that when Audrey and Roger were leaving Bolton to go to the training college in London to embark on their careers as officers in the Salvation Army, that the songsters, that is the senior choir, sang this hymn. So I'll just get my hopefully trusty trombone and just play a verse of The Ash Grove. I'm sure you'll remember it. Thanks.
I'm reading on behalf of Christine Winnard, Joyce's daughter-in-law. One of my greatest pleasures was to be able to sit and chat with Joyce over a cup of tea and a plate of biscuits. On one such occasion, we were chatting about the choir I'm in, now practicing for the next Christmas concert. As we chatted about what the choir was going to sing that year, I realised that Joyce had been the first person to teach me to sing. I went on to say a really heartfelt thank you to her for the time she and John had put into teaching us to sing as members of the Double Singing Company of the Salvation Army. A message from Marion, Christine's sister. I used to go and visit Joyce with Christine on a Wednesday morning. I'm into family history, so Joyce and I would discuss the family. One day I took my laptop and was telling her who I had found with the same surname, Winnard or Pipprell, Joyce's maiden name, and did she know of them? She would talk about her time in Jersey, where she was born, and the time the family had to leave as the Germans invaded. I found her memories of this time very sharp and clear. I was fascinated listening to her. She had a very strong character and will. I really enjoyed my time with her and felt she still had a lot to share. I think about her a lot when I'm on Ancestry, and a hint for the name of Winnard or Pipprell comes up. Joyce was a lovely lady. A tribute from Kath Grimshaw. I first met Joyce many years ago when she and John, with Irene, Audrey and Howard, used to come on holiday to Jersey to visit family. When Roger and Audrey married, contact was made again, and I have seen her from time to time. During these last few years, she came to Norwich with them, and it was lovely to renew friendship and spend time talking about days gone by. I have always admired Joyce for her gentle kindness and patience, and for the tremendous courage and strength she has shown in times of personal difficulties. She was a real Christian in all her ways, and it was a privilege to know her.
This is a tribute by Bernard and Eileen Kelly from Bolton Citadel, read by Andy Nicholson. I first met Joyce in 1942 as an 8-year-old cub, and she was our cub leader at Dorbill's Salvation Army. Later she became singing company leader, and again I was a member. After national service in 1954, I came back in the band, and Joyce, myself, and the corps officer became the trombone section of Dorbill Band. I always felt safe with Joyce in the trombone section because her husband was the bandmaster, and I felt we were safe from criticism. I last had a long talk with Joyce when she celebrated her 90th birthday at Bolton Citadel. Joyce was a lovely lady and friend. Both she and her husband were a strong influence on my life. and my wife and I are proud to have known them.
This is my memorial tribute, from a niece to an aunt. In the course of our lives, there are many influences on us, not least of all those made by people. And often the greatest of those influences come from members of our own families. For me, Auntie Joyce was one such person, though I doubt she would have realised it. When the Harmon family lived at Moseley Common and attended the Salvation Army at Tilsley-Court, my cousins Irene and Audrey had new tambourines. Auntie Joyce asked my mum if I would like one of the girls' old tambourines, which was in very good condition, for my approaching birthday. Would I? You bet I would. The gift of that tambourine was the birth of the timbrel group at Tilsley-Court, as after I went along with my newly acquired tambourine, other girls in the corps got tambourines, and the bandmaster, who had 2 daughters, began teaching us girls to play our tambourines. The tambourine has been a treasured part of my life throughout the years, especially teaching girls to play, including a Church of England Girls' Brigade while I was a cadet at the Army's Training College. I won't part with my last tambourine, bought in 1965 at the Army's centenary celebrations in London while on holiday with Miriam and her parents. It's even been played with the Home League Singers group at Boscombe Corps just a couple of years ago. Having 2 older girl cousins meant Auntie Joyce often passed on Irene's and Audrey's outgrown dresses, and as they were often dressed alike, I had a good supply for quite a while. The Harmon family returned to live in Bolton in 1958, and at that time Auntie Joyce was singing company leader, later taking over leadership of the singing company. It is perhaps in that role I remember Auntie Joyce most as I was growing up in the corps at Bolton Daub Hill. She was a competent leader, taking her role seriously as she led the weekly practices which moulded us youngsters into a group worth listening to. Tuesday night practices were full on as Auntie Joyce taught us to sing as a group. We were taught how to sing confidently, with expression, with clear diction, to listen to the person next to us, and I will always remember having the crescendo and diminuendo music signs explained to us as hairpins opening and closing. She had endless patience, especially with youngsters whose singing ability left much to be desired. Remember Albert Whiteside? Under Auntie Joyce's leadership, the singing company became proficient, and we were even the solo brigade at the Divisional Young People's Spring Festival at Manchester Temple. I've tried to recall some of the songs we learned and sang on Sunday afternoons in the praise meetings. Songs such as Sing of Him, We Find Pleasure in the Army, The Lamb, and the Lord's Prayer. On my return to Bolton in 1991, I was able to see Auntie Joyce regularly on Sundays at Bolton Citadel, but over the past 24 years since moving away, there have only been occasional meetups. However, 2 brief conversations remain with me. She told me she looked forward to receiving our Christmas card with our annual round-robin letter with news of the family. And the second conversation was when Alan and I gave her a lift back to Sunlight Road following Auntie Gladys's funeral. I saw a person of deep compassion and empathy as Auntie Joyce showed me photos of the family and expressed sadness at how much my own dear mum had lost out on over the years. I suppose I could best sum up my memories of Auntie Joyce as a faithful Christian lady who served the Lord cheerfully with commitment and devotion, not least of all to her family. And as we so often say in the Salvation Army, servant of God, well done. With love, Eileen.
Servant of God, well done. We're going to end our time today listening to Juliet reading Nan's own memoirs, her own words of the evacuation from Jersey that so many people today have referred to.
Hi there, this is Juliet. Joyce has held lots of different roles in my life. She was my great aunt through my dad, Gordon. She was my dinner lady when I first started primary school at Beach House. My singing company leader. In 1992, she became my grandma when Mum and Howard married. And then most recently, she's been known in our house as Nan, awesome gift giver. Today, I'm going to read you her account of what happened during the Second World War, the German occupation of the Channel Islands. I love this story. I find it so inspirational. It gives us an insight into her bravery, her sense of adventure, work ethic, and it's a true love story. Some of my family have said that I should give my account of what happened during the Second World War, the German occupation of the Channel Islands. So here goes. Evacuation from Journey Channel Islands, June 20th, 1945. I was born Joyce Hannah Pipperell on May 4th, 1925, in Jersey. The sea and nice sandy beaches never far away, and the summers in particular always seemed to be warm and sunny. I was a brownie, then a girl guide, which I really enjoyed. I left school at 14 and went to work in an exclusive ladies' shop. I was in the gowns department, selling coats, dresses, hats and bridal wear. I was only allowed to sell hats at the beginning and never did get to sell any bridal wear. The war started on Sunday, 3rd of September, 1939. No one ever thought then that by the end of June the island would be occupied by the Germans. 3 of my uncles were called up, 2 in the army, the other in the RAF. We had the gas masks and ration books, the same as on the mainland. But as the months passed and the fighting intensified in France, we could hear the gunfire from across the channel, and casualties were brought across to Jersey. My dad, a volunteer down at the pier, said some were in very bad shape, but didn't want to talk about it. It was too shocking. All this was happening just a few miles away, so what about here? Would we get involved in the fighting? Were we going to be invaded? Rumours were rife. Was it possible we could be captured and occupied by Germany? What good would it be to them? Well, it's British. That would be a feather in their cap. Also, a strategic position in the English Channel. And so it went on. As time went on, it seemed more and more likely that the rumours were going to prove true and we would be invaded. But it still seemed impossible. It was reported that there were going to be some boats sent across from England, and those who wished to leave the island had to register at the town hall. I don't know too much about that because I was at work, but I do know there were long queues there, also at the banks, folk trying to get some money out. Everyone was very undecided, stay or leave. Finally, after days of discussion and much soul-searching, it was decided we were going to leave. My mother folded a 10-shilling note and wrapped it in a hanky, then sewed it inside my vest. This was to be used if and only if I was separated from them. And on arriving in England, I had to make my way to Chard in Somerset, where we had some relatives. Thankfully, this never happened, and the 10-shilling note back in Mum's purse. The airport had been closed, and everything was transferred to Fife in Scotland, so Auntie Minna and Dennis, nearly 4, came to stay with us. We could more or less just take a change of clothes. My birthday had been the previous month, and I wasn't too happy to leave my presents behind. I did, however, manage to bring a small manicure set with me. On the morning we were leaving, we washed up and made the beds as usual. Then, before we came away, we each took a promise from the promise box, and Auntie Minna prayed. I found leaving very traumatic, but how my parents felt I didn't really appreciate till years later when I married and had my own home. When we got to the harbour, we were told it was women and children first, but men would be taken on board if there was room. There was no time for lengthy goodbyes, everyone had to keep moving. I had been on what I thought was a crowded boat before, during the summer season, but this was another thing entirely. I wasn't actually aware of the boat casting off. I had noticed a few men, so I was gazing around to see if I could see my dad. I knew he would get on if he could. I saw this tall man, a trilby on his head, obviously searching for someone. I couldn't make out his features, but I said to Mum, "I think I can see Dad." She said, "Joyce, don't say that if it's not right. It might not be him." I pushed my way through the crowd and managed to get near enough to see and shouted to him. You can imagine my mum's face when I got back to where she was, accompanied by my dad. A joyous reunion. The journey to Southampton was a long one, some kind of detour to avoid mines, but thankfully we arrived safely. It seems we weren't expected to dock there, so no preparation had been made. However, the WVS somehow managed to get some corned beef and bread, and came around with that, and some water which was carried in big bowls and ladled out to us in enamel mugs. You drank it and then it was passed on to the next person, but we were grateful for that. One mother couldn't pacify her baby, there was no milk available. My mother had brought a tin of evaporated milk with her. She thought it might come in useful. She got my dad to take it to her, and they got it diluted, so the baby got fed. The previous night, Southampton had had a bad raid on the docks where we were, and they wanted us out quickly. Auntie Minna and Dennis had already gone on to her in-laws to stay until travel arrangements to Scotland could be made. Trains began to arrive, and we were told to get on. We didn't know where we were heading for. All the station destination boards had been removed during the war for security. Not that it would have made any difference if we had known. It was a very long journey and no eating facilities. We eventually arrived at our destination, Barnsley, Yorkshire. Buses were outside the station to take us to a civic reception at the town hall, complete with the mayor and his chain, and this at 3:15 a.m, welcoming us to Barnsley. We were tired and hungry and could have done without the speeches, but the food was very welcome, I know that. But what it was, I don't remember. We were then taken to a church hall to sleep on the floor. We had a blanket that was for women and children. The men were in the church on the pews. I think we were better off on the floor. The next morning, well, it was the same one actually, only later. Several people came to volunteer to take us in until they could sort something out. The Corps Sergeant Major and his wife from the local Salvation Army offered us accommodation in their home. My dad and I were out every day trying to get a job. Neither of us managed to find any, and he was getting beside himself. We were there a fortnight, and during that time, we somehow managed to get in contact with Uncle Will and family, who had been taken to Bolton. He had got work and said there was work available for carpenters, my dad's occupation. He advised us to move there. We wouldn't be able to stay with them. They had 4 children, and were sharing with another Jersey family, but he could get us a room to rent. Now we were faced with another difficult decision. If we stayed in Barnsley, we would eventually be housed somewhere as they had in Bolton. If we moved ourselves to Bolton, it would be entirely our responsibility to fend for ourselves without any help from the council. The work situation was the deciding factor. We would go. Now, something else to sort out. We discovered we didn't have enough money for the train fare. Mum said she would sell her engagement ring. Still not enough. Grandma Pipperell had left me a lovely gold watch that I obviously treasured. Anyway, I said they could sell that as well. They were very reluctant to take it from me, but that is what happened, and that is how we had the money to come to Bolton. I must be honest and admit that I often have had feelings of nostalgia about my watch. But Uncle Will was right about work. Dad got a job the first day, and I got one the next day. We felt we had done the best thing in coming to Bolton, and as events evolved, I'm absolutely certain. We had a rented room for the three of us. Sleep, cook, eat, wash up, with the use of the bathroom. After a couple of months, we moved just across the road, where we had the same facilities, but I had a small bedroom of my own. That was brilliant. My mother took on some work at the Salvation Army hostel, repairing bedding. All the time we were looking out for better accommodation. Where we were was very dingy. Eventually, there was an advert for someone to be housekeeper. The lady was a teacher, and her husband was in the RAF at Padgate. She went there every weekend. The upshot of this was we moved into this very nice semi. Mum did everything as if it was our own home, and cooked for Mrs. Bleakley along with ours. We were all very happy with the arrangement. It was great to be in nice surroundings again, even if it wasn't ours. From arriving in Bolton, we attended the Halliwell Corps. The rest of our family soldiered at Bolton Citadel. Actually, it was nearer, but the main reason was my dad was always on the side of the underdog, and Halliwell was the smaller corps. So, my gran and granddad, Pop we called him, Auntie Rosie, Auntie Anne and Uncle Frank and their 2 boys, Uncle Willie, Auntie Elsie and their 4 children were all at the Citadel. We 3 at Halliwell. Until one of the other shop assistants where I worked was a young man called George Young. One day at break time, he was reading a magazine and started chuckling. Of course, I wanted to know what was funny. He told me it was a cartoon called Peter of the Primary. This was in a Salvation Army Children Weekly. And I said I knew of it. He asked how I knew. He more or less got my family history, grandparents and several relatives at Bolton Citadel, and my parents and I at Halliwell. He burst out with, "Halliwell? You want to come to Double?" My mum moved from repairing bedding at the hostel to making curtains at the same shop where I was working. So of course, George started pressing her to come to Double. A couple of months later, we went to visit this Double. Everyone was very welcoming. There were several teenagers, and we felt at home there, so we decided to transfer. The folk at Halliwell were sorry to see us go, but there was an affinity between the 2 corps, and they gave us their blessing. There was, however, a downside to the move. It was twice the distance to get to the meetings. Also, Mum and I wanted to join the Songster Brigade, so that meant getting to practices as well. We made another move, this time a few streets away from the Salvation Army Hall, sharing house with one of the songsters whose husband was a prisoner of war. The house had only 2 bedrooms and 1 bed, so Vera, as she was called, and I had to share a room and bed, and Mum and Dad had to buy one. Not an ideal situation, but it was only meaning to be temporary. We were on the lookout for a house to rent in that area, preferably furnished, or at least partly. At least we now had a bed to put in a house when we got one. Finally, an unfurnished house became available to rent. We decided to take it and began looking out for second-hand things. We couldn't afford new. Some of the charity shops we have now would have been welcome. The Major from the Corps sold us a carpet on easy payments. We had the loan of a lovely polished chiffonier. This was like a very large sideboard, which Mum was happy to keep in its pristine condition. Its owner was Mrs. Culshaw, who later became mother-in-law to George, who I mentioned earlier. We had it on loan for as long as we needed it. We were certainly very grateful to her for her kindness and trust. Eventually, we were able to move into 181 Deanchurch Lane, our own home. At first, our possessions were very limited, just the bare essentials. But gradually, we were able to get more comfortable. It seemed very strange to us that some people were surprised that we hadn't got our own furniture with us. Obviously, they hadn't realised the full implication of the situation. We settled really well into the Corps. Mum and I were in the songsters, and I was helping with the juniors and was made cub leader, Arcala. Apart from the Salvation Army activities, I belonged to a VAD, Voluntary Aid Detachment, of the Red Cross. After taking and passing the first aid and home nursing course, I worked part-time in a convalescent hospital. This was extra to my normal job, evenings and Sundays in the main. Also, cinema duty. That was quite good, because if there weren't any incidents, we got to see the film. Apart from these activities, the shop workers had to take turns at fire watching. This was of course overnight in the town centre. Rooms over the shops were equipped with a bed and facilities to make ourselves a drink, and we took turns to try and sleep or stay awake and watch out for any incidents. The nursing was what I enjoyed most. Among the teenagers that I mentioned earlier, there were 6 of us who became more than just friends. James Partington and Elsie Warburton, George Young and Lily Culshaw, John Winnard and Joyce Pipple. The lads were drafted into the forces, George the Navy, James the paratroopers, and John the infantry. When they came home on leave it was great, but going back was horrible. I am thankful to say they all survived the war. 1945 was a year to remember. The Channel Islands were liberated by the British Army on May 9th. It must have been a grand sight after nearly 5 years of being under German rule to see the swastika pulled down and replaced by the Union Jack. British soldiers walking the streets and the German soldiers being walked down to the boats that were waiting to take them back to Germany. Gradually, those who had been evacuated to the mainland started to return and began to rebuild their lives. Finding employment and getting their homes together again was no mean task. 1945, June 8th, saw the end of the war in Europe, and in August, the war in Japan. It was some time before our 3 fiancés were demobbed and back home, but 1945 saw 3 weddings at Double Salvation Army. In January, James and Elsie. In August, George and Lily, with George in naval uniform. And December, John and Joyce, with John in a kilt. He was in the Highland Light Infantry. It is really strange how things happen. If it hadn't been for the war, I wouldn't have left Jersey. I wouldn't have come to Bolton and worked in the same shop as George, who kept flying the flag for Double. And I certainly wouldn't have met my soulmate John. All things work together for good. Well, it certainly did for me.